Hello. A while back I was invited to participate in the big pot bash hosted by Bill Making Stuff, and today a letter regarding that showed up in the mail. But this was the wrong letter, I'll deal with that later. Alright, that's more like it. Today I'll be making a robot with body parts that will be randomized using this junkbot generator made by Bill. I'll roll a d20 for each body part, and the number of the die roll will determine the theme of that particular body part. I decided that I wanted to roll all the 6 dice at the same time, so I needed to color code them beforehand. The light green die would be rolled for the head, the pink would be the body, the dark green would be the arms, the black die would be the hands, the purple would be the legs, and the sparkly metal die would be rolled for the overall flavor of the robot. Alright, the results are in and here they are. I know what you might be thinking. Oh, you chose the colors afterwards and you rolled a couple of... No, I only rolled once and chose the colors beforehand. That's the truth. Okay. I drew up a sketch of what I wanted to make based on the results that I got. And I'll talk you through the individual parts throughout the video, so let's start by making the head. I rolled a 20, which meant that I'd be making a godlike head. And what is a godlike head really? Well, I ain't got no clue about that. But the more I thought about it, the more I felt like making it looking just like a quite normal human face would be the way to go. I mean, there's no shortage of god complex in us human beings. I just made sure to make the face look quite androgynous, as well as giving the face a blank expression. I drew some inspiration from the movie Ex Machina, where the face is human but the back of the head is robotic, so I decided to do the same thing and divided the head in the middle. After the head had been baked in the oven for a couple of minutes, then I sanded the backside of the head to make it a bit more smooth, before making some additional details for the head. I started by making studs that I would place along the edge of the face from the small cylindrical parts of some old Warhammer sprue I had laying around. And when the studs were in place, they kind of made the head resemble an underwater mine a little bit. So I also decided to add some spikes in between the studs to make it look a bit like a halo or something like that. And then the head was done, and next up on the agenda was to make a body. Just like with the head, I rolled a 20 for the body, and according to the junkbot generator, a 20 means death. If there is anyone watching this video that likes pretentious rock and roll music as much as I do, then you might be familiar with the band Tool, and if so, you might be familiar with their album Undertow. When I rolled death, I knew that I wanted to make the body being a ribcage, but I didn't want it to look normal when the ribs are connected at the front, but rather make it look more like the rib cage on the cover for the album Undertow, where the ribs are sprawling outwards in a creepy fashion. So I rolled out a couple of small clay ropes into some pointy looking ribs in different shapes and sizes before baking them in the oven. And once they had been baked, I reshaped the ends of the ribs to make them fit the spine a bit better before gluing them in place. Maybe I'll just keep the top 2 ribs as arms. I mean, it's already looking quite nice. Or maybe I don't. And then all the ribs had been put into place, and you better believe that 1 second later I'd managed to break one off. But I'll fix that later. You know, this is the first time that I've ever made a robot before, and considering I've made a human face and a rib cage, it's not looking much like a robot at all, and I needed to get into the robot state of mind a little bit more, so I started by making the pelvic area into an upside down cone of sorts, before adding the top parts of the legs that I gave 3 individual plates to make it look like some robot scale armor or something to that extent. I'm not really sure what you would call it, but I think it turned out kinda nice. And after a couple of minutes in the oven, I sanded them down to give them a little bit of a brushed metal texture. And when the head had been glued into place, then the body was done and it was time to start to make the arms. But before I started to make the arms, I needed to make something that would connect them to the body. So I made a pair of shoulder blades, as well as the top part of the arms that already had some small baked clay balls at the ends that was used to create the shoulder joints so the arms could move freely once the shoulder blades had been baked and glued into place. Alright, so I rolled a 5, which meant stubby arms, and the design I settled on was pretty much the stubbiest arm design I could come up with. I decided to make the arms and hands out of XPS foam to make them as lightweight as possible, since the connection point to the arms would be really small, and I didn't know how stable it would become. It probably would have worked out just fine with clay, but I kind of like making stuff out of foam, so I think it worked out just fine. And just like with the arms, I also rolled a 5 for the hands, which meant kaboom! And I figured why not make the biggest kaboom of them all. So I decided to make the right hand into a launch button. And I guess you've already figured out what the left hand is gonna be. Yeah, that's right, a nuke. I'm giving the robot nuke hands, okay? I was thinking for a while what I was gonna call this creation, but as I was making the nuke hands, it became clear to me. There's only one name fitting for a robot like this. The Messenger of Peace. Yep, seems about right. Then I was done with the arms and the hands, but I'm not gonna glue them to the body just yet. Wonder what this button will do. I rolled 11 for the legs, which meant dash, so naturally I decided to give the robot a running pose. Because in all honesty I had no idea what to make with that word otherwise, so I glued on the main part of the legs before starting to make the robot's knees. The robot's knees. Anyways, after I'd made the circular knee things out of some XPS foam, then I glued them onto the rest of the legs before trying my darnest to make some robot feet that didn't look too much like some kind of kitchen appliance. And not only did I manage to cut my finger, but I'll be damned if the design I gave the feet doesn't show up in a kitchen in a couple of 100 years. Just saying. I also made some shins for the robot that I glued in place before adding the feet to the end of the legs. And when that was done, then it was time to glue the arms to the body, and to get some extra stability I glued one stud on each arm onto a rib. Alright, it's starting to look quite nice, but before it's done we need to make a heart and some wires using some green stuff. I'm always beyond impressed when I see people making entire sculptures out of green stuff, but I'm not gonna lie, green stuff isn't exactly my favorite thing to sculpt with, but since I can't bake the robot in the oven with all the things made from XPS foam on it, I needed to sculpt the final things with something that would air dry. I quite recently rewatched the movie Metropolis, and if you're unfamiliar with it, it's a silent movie from 1927 that's pretty much the first sci-fi movie ever made, and there's a line in that movie that says, "The mediator between the head and the hand must be the heart." So of course I had to seize the opportunity and disregard that statement entirely, and connect the wires from the nukes straight into the head. Then I was done building the bot, but I need something to stand on, so let's make a base. I drew a circle around the spinning display stand that I use for my final shots, cause I figured that would be the perfect size for the base. I refined the edges with a knife to make the base as round as possible before taking it outside and sanding it until it was reasonably round. Then I added a tilted step to the base that would make the robot lean forward a bit more, because the idea for the base was to have the Messenger of Peace running across an ocean of blood. So I cut out some small pieces from a transparent plastic, because I was gonna try and make a splash effect from the impact of the foot hitting the blood. I've seen people making splash effect using resin, but unfortunately I don't have any resin, but what I do have is a buttload of hot glue. So I figured I'll try to make a splash effect with that instead, as well as the water, or in this case the blood around it. And I gotta say I'm quite happy about the way it turned out, but I guess the moment of truth will be once it's painted. And as far as I know everything is built, so well, you know what time it is. It is time to I started out by painting the ocean of blood with some reddish, brown and black colors, and at this point it was looking a bit more like an ocean of chocolate pudding, but don't worry, we'll fix that later. Then I proceeded by painting some brighter red highlights on the splash, as well as the blood closest to it. I tried to keep the highlights to a minimum, since I guess an ocean of blood would look quite dark in general when it's still. Then I added a healthy amount of what I thought was gloss varnish, but it was gloss medium, which dried quite poorly and I had to repaint the entire thing, but it turned out quite nice, I have to say, once it was repainted. Alright, then the base was done, so let's paint the Messenger of Peace. I gotta say that building this thing as well as painting it, of course, has been a whole lot of fun. If you're someone that have been watching my videos for an extended period of time, you might have realized that I'm making stuff that is more fantasy related than sci-fi perhaps. And I will probably focus on making more fantasy related stuff down the line. But I'm not gonna lie, you know, making this thing has kind of got me thinking a little bit. I mean, I love science fiction, but I feel like I'm a bit more nitpicky when it comes to science fiction than perhaps fantasy. You know, I want stuff to feel dark and dirty and a bit more ragtaggedy, I guess. And when I think about science fiction, I get the feeling that it needs to be clean and pristine, and you know, stuff like that is hard to make. But I mean, that's the thing about science fiction, that it doesn't have to be clean and pristine and perfect. It's just a mental barrier that I feel like I have to get through whenever I think about making stuff that is sci-fi related. So who knows, maybe I've just crossed the barrier into sci-fi. Maybe, who knows? Subscribe if you haven't. Anyways, oh wow, what a rant. I have to come clean about something. I totally forgot about the die roll that determines the flavor in the beginning, and I realized that as I was painting. If you have a wildly good memory when it comes to numbers, you might remember that I rolled a 14. And if you don't have a good memory when it comes to numbers, well, I rolled a 14. And a 14 means that the flavor is dirty. And even though I added some washes to make the metals look a bit more scruffy and old, I didn't feel like that was quite enough. I figured since the Messenger of Peace is running on an ocean of blood, I felt like I needed to make him a bit more bloody, and that will be the dirty flavor. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end of the video, and a special thanks to Bill Making Stuff for inviting me to this Big Bot Bash. Remember to check out the other videos from all the other participants in the Big Bot Bash, I surely will. So until the next time, be kind to yourself and others around you, and I will see you again really soon. Here are the final results. Please consider leaving a like on the video if you liked it, and perhaps subscribe if you're new here. The next video I'm gonna release is not gonna be sci-fi related, but you might like it anyways. So until the next time, goodbye!